We have a busy day today, so we have a lot to get through. This is going to be the nitty-gritty of things, and we're going to talk about a lot. I mean, we're going to start with social media. We're going to talk about outsourcing, hot future trends in technology, mobile applications and development, addressing the Arabic content crisis, and e-government in the Arab world. So, for starters, I'm just going to ask that kindly we could have mobile phones set to silent, if that's possible. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, hashtag MENAICT. Lots of activity going on up there. The guys at B Kingdom, rocking it. Thank you guys. Great stuff. And I want to let you know about a breakout session that we have, which is in breakout session room 2. And this is going to be called Building the Private Cloud. So, kind of taking off from where we left with the cloud yesterday. Building the Private Cloud, Optimize Business Productivity and Efficiency. This is going to be presented by EMC, which is an industry leader in providing cloud computing infrastructure products, solutions, and services. This session will focus on establishing and understanding for what is cloud computing, how cloud computing benefits organizations, and what it takes to build a cloud-based data center by leveraging existing investments in IT. It'll be a very useful session. This session will be taking place at 11 o'clock a.m. in breakout session room 2. We also have the Microsoft Oasis pitch going on during the morning while we are here learning and sharing and interacting. And I want you all to keep in mind the words of His Majesty King Abdullah II yesterday. I want you to own the discussions today, come out with your questions, challenge the perceptions, challenge the norms, and without further ado, let's get things started. So welcome to the Chattering Classes, turning social media into money in the MENA ICT region. Now, we all know that social media is kind of the big buzzword, but before it was media, it was social. As a good friend managed to tell me last night over dinner, it was social, and it's about how we interact with each other as human beings, how we talk to each other, how we communicate, how we make it happen on a daily basis. And it's just simply moving into this new format. And it's becoming more like human communication. So whether it's Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, it's really influencing the way we interact with each other. So we want to talk about how social networks are affecting us in terms of expression and freedom of speech, in terms of business, society, politics, family, and what are the users of the MENA region doing with social networks. We'll talk about bloggers, we'll talk about privacy, legislation, policy, and now I would like to introduce our panelists for this point. First we have the founder of Twitvid, a young entrepreneur who, upon graduating from university, decided he was going to go down to Silicon Valley and start up Twitvid with a friend, Mr. Adham. Next we have Mr. Mostafa Kamel Attia, Managing Director of LINKonline. Mostafa is the Managing Director of LINKonline, which is one of the largest online publishing companies in the MENA region, owning and operating several large portals and digital media platform lines of products, as well as being involved in the production of new content for the region in terms of film, music, and so on. I have also the Chief Strategic Officer and Media CT of Ipsos Media, Ms. Natalie Lacey. As you know, Ipsos Media is the second largest market research company in the world and produces audience ratings for some of the major media on this planet. We also have online activist and entrepreneur Ms. Maria Magdalene. Just 2 years in business, she's 21 years old and has developed a successful youth platform reaching over 30,000 members, or attracting over 30,000 members, developing a first-of-its-kind venture to attract business owners to invest in the development of youth where they consist of more than 70% of the Saudi population. So he's based in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We have the Chief Executive Officer of EnCounsult, Dr. Yusuf Mansur. He's also an advisory committee member at AIESEC. Dr. Mansur held the position of the CEO of the Jordan Agency for Economic Development, the Jordan Investment Board, and played a role of International Industrial Upgrading Advisor at the Jordan Upgrading and Modernization Program, JUMP. We also have the Group Director of Spot On PR, Mr. Alexander McNabb. Possibly the most prolific Twitter user I've ever seen in my life. Morning, Alex. Drove it home yesterday with some really good points. He's a communications, public relations, and marketing consultant based in the UAE, specializing in the Middle East telecommunications industry, particularly in the launch and operations of leadership operators in competitive markets. We also have the co-founder and chief executive officer of D1G.com, Mr. Majied Qasem. Morning, Majied. Now, for those of you who don't know D1G, D1G.com is a leading regional portal which is focused on providing a range of media-rich and socially enabled services. Prior to that, Majied was the director of the Jordan Education Initiative, JEI, focusing on creating a replicable model for education reform through public-private partnerships. And last but not least, we have our self-proclaimed status quo hacker, Ms. Nadine Toukan. Nadine is a producer, curator, and conversation provocateur at large. She's the co-founder of Urdun Mubda, which is fostering dialogue towards growing Jordan's creative economy and lifestyle, where online conversations impact offline actions, contributing to nurturing a new generation of mind style. She also produced the award-winning Jordanian film, Captain Abu Raed, and she's keeping very busy this year to rewire herself and developing a slate of multi-platform animation and feature productions while designing her creativity fund. So, good morning to you all. Thank you for being with us. It's a big panel, so we have a lot to talk about. First, I would like to start with a voting question. We're going to do that before we talk to our panelists. Let's gauge some opinions out there and see what you guys think of social media. So grab your voting devices. Let's have our voting question up there. We have, how are you using social media in your organization? Let's think about that for a minute. Now this is anonymous voting, so I want you to be honest, okay? Number one, we have a page on Facebook or some other social media outlet and or a social media usage policy. We have a marketing team that is in charge of social media. We are hiring a consultant or agency to handle it all for us. We are involving every single member of the organization in social media. Or we've decided social media is too risky to use for our organization. And yes, this exists. So, let's wrap up the vote. Okay. Interesting results. So let's take a look here real quick. We have 37% say that we have a page on a social media like Facebook or a social media usage policy. 21% say we have a marketing team in charge of social media. 9% say we're hiring a consultant or agency to handle it all for us. 13% say we're involving every single member of the organization in social media. And 19% say we've decided social media is too risky to use for our organization. Now these may all be very valid for your line of work. But let's open up the discussion now, and we'll see where you stand afterwards. So, Mostafa, Mo, I'm going to start with Mo. And Mo, let's talk a little bit about your story with social media and how you came about to create Twitvid. And tell us also a little bit about how you intend to make money using Twitvid, because we're talking about turning social media into money.
Sure. Let me first explain a bit to the audience what Twitvid is. Twitvid is a very easy and fast way to share videos on Twitter. So, as we know, Twitter limits people to posting 140 characters of text as an update. So we provide a service where people can upload videos and engage their customers that way. You can upload a Twitvid through your phone, through MMS, through email. You can upload a webcam recording. You can use it from a PC or from a Mac. We try to be anywhere where our customer is there to upload a video. So in terms of like using Twitvid, you can use Twitvid as a tool to market your brand. And it becomes very powerful that way because people can retweet the video and it grows your kind of image very virally that way. In terms of making money, on Twitvid, there's 2 ways of making money that we're thinking about. The first one is advertising, and the second one is subscriptions, right? So on the new Twitter interface, Twitvids can actually be embedded inside Twitter.com. So if a brand is looking to put their logo inside the video, they can pay us a certain amount of money, and then they can display their brand inside Twitter.com, inside their videos. So that's one way. The other more interesting way, in our opinion, is advertising. So you can get more Twitter followers through Twitvid by using social ads, which is our own social video advertising network.
And how is that different from the typical advertising we're seeing in online video right now?
So social ads is the first, it's a social advertising network in the world. It's a new way of advertising using video. So typical video advertising is typically pre-rolls or overlays. Let's say you're watching a video on YouTube, you're going to have to watch a 15-second pre-roll before the video plays, right? But social ads are a bit different. Instead of watching that 15-second pre-roll about Honda, you get a choice to follow Honda on Twitter. And Honda could possibly pay per follower or per retweet. So that way, brands and advertisers get to acquire qualified leads using Twitter, as opposed to just show impressions of their video ad.
So are all advertisers created equal, Mo? I mean, is there like an upper echelon of advertisers that you can target? And what do you have to do to be able to reach them in terms of managing your content and managing your site?
Yeah, it's actually quite a complicated question because there's, you can, when you're trying to monetize your site using advertising networks, you can go to the advertising networks that pay you a low CPM, like a 50-cent CPM, for example. And those plug into anywhere, basically. You don't have to do content monitoring on your site. You don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. But once you want to get to the more premium advertising network, the ones that pay about 5 times that, about a $2 to $3 CPM, you're going to have to clean up your website. So you're going to have to do a lot of content monitoring over there, remove offensive material, violent material. And to do that, you're going to have to set up a content monitoring team that's always making sure that your site is kept up and cleaned up, basically.
So you basically, and I understand that you've outsourced your content review, so it's going on 24/7. You have teams that are doing that on an outsourced basis, right?
Yeah.
And then what if, on a massive scale, on a bigger scale, how can we implement something like this in terms of content review?
Basically, the way it scales up is, you can use a service that's called, we're actually launching an API called filtermysite.com. And you pay on a per call basis. So if you want to monitor like a picture or a video or a page, you can pay us, whatever the cost is for monitoring that site. And like a typical team of moderators cost about, you can find like really good moderators that cost about between $3 and $5 an hour, and they get to moderate about 5,000 pictures of videos an hour. So the cost is about half a cent per picture or video.
Okay. And so this is interesting because you started a certain business for a certain objective, and that business, Twitvid, is now generating other businesses that are springing out from it that are indirectly related. And sort of necessity being the mother of invention, you're having to create new businesses to fulfill the needs of Twitvid. Yeah,
well, the thing is, everything that we spin off is stuff that we're working on internally. So let's say, like, we had to build this content monitoring team, and we've built it in such a way that it's all modularized, that it's all, like, API-based. So we try our best to launch those APIs to the public. And it is costing us money to do the moderation, and hence we actually charge for that kind of service.
Great stuff. All right, thanks, Mo. And we'll come back to that a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about some other things you're doing to, for revenue streams and what barriers there were for you to start your business. But first, I'd like to move on to Mostafa Attia from LINKonline. Mostafa, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing in terms of content. So I understand you guys rely a lot on user-generated content for many of your sites. And why are you guys producing movies and music?
We're not producing. Let me start with a bit of correction.
Okay.
We're managing content acquisition operations where we acquire music albums, movies, real productions, not like amateur stuff, and put that online to give space to a legal, legitimate operation of buying movies and music in a legal way and in an easy way, rather than the pirated, infested internet. So we're just giving the producers and the users option to make money out of the net, and for the users itself, they can consume the content in a legal way and find an alternative. But when we talk about content generated by the users, we have huge amount of videos that were mainly uploaded by the users, as well as the comments. In Egypt, we operate one of the largest websites that generate something around 62,000 comments a month on the news that we generate. And from these comments, you can see the opinions of each person. So you can see Mostafa's opinion on sports, on politics, on entertainment, and you can choose to follow Mostafa because he says good comments about sports or good comments about the politics itself. So by this, we're giving everyone space and a page where he can express his comments on all of our websites. We have different websites, very wide range, from food delivery to news and politics to sports to movies to music. And we try to reach and extend that reach to the whole region. Today, we have a bit of setback that we're focusing much on Egypt, but we're trying to get out of that bit by bit.
So do you see yourself as staying as an ad-based business? If you're not going to remain as an ad-based business, how are you going to expand to other revenue streams?
By transactional. We believe in the freemium models and transactional model, very, very small amounts. We're not talking about big transactions of tens or hundreds. We are talking about a movie where you can get the latest Arabic movie or Egyptian movie for less than $2 or $3. And we believe that this is a very fair price, and it's not a problem for anyone to pay for that, because again, it would be less than even the pirated CD on the streets.
How are the production companies handling that? I mean, are they open to this? How are they interacting with you guys? How are they engaging with these concepts? And how do you manage the intellectual property rights, digital security, or anything like that?
It's very tough. It's getting better, but it's very tough in the beginning to convince a producer to put his movie legal on the internet, because internet has been the biggest threat for the movie and music industry in the region for the last, maybe you would say, 10 years. So when I go to them and say, I want to put your movie on internet, of course they refuse in the beginning. But we have a business model where they can, where we can justify that this is good for them. And some of them actually agreed.
So you're a new world player in an old world game.
Yes.
Great stuff. Natalie Lacey, Ipsos Media. Tell us a little bit about how we can measure the relative use of social media versus traditional media landscape, since you're the measurement person here on the panel.
Yes, the measurement. I will try to avoid a whole series of numbers and just talk a little bit about how social networks are being used and the role of media in general. So, of course, in order to monetize, you talked about advertising, we need to know who is doing and watching what. And within the region, of course, we measure all of the media vehicles, television, radio, print, and now starting an online measurement system where you look at who is visiting the sites from a site perspective, and also from a user perspective, who's actually going to the site from the consumer side. Of course, in the media landscape, we know this all around the world, television still dominates. We have about, within the region, people spend about 4 hours a day watching television versus about an hour on the internet or mobile. Of course, concurrent use of media is one of the big trends. People sitting watching television, using their mobile, surfing the internet all at the same time. So while the combined use of media is about 10 hours a day, a lot of that is actually being done at the same time. If we look at, in fact, the use of social networking sites within the region, we have about a third of Arabs in the region using social networking sites of some kind, and almost all are actually using Facebook. And there's been a lot of talk on Facebook. It's just significant to note, actually, that Qzone, which is the equivalent in China, is as larger than Facebook. So in terms of actually how that is represented in the world, it's interesting just to see how Facebook dominates conversations, but not necessarily the incidents. And so the key in terms of the social networking sites, of course, they've increased in use substantially, and they're really replacing some of the other ways that people used to communicate. So while the use of social networking sites is up about 40% year on year, there's been a significant decline in the use of email. So you see this kind of replacement of how social networking sites are being used. Most of the activity on social networking sites is photos and people checking out photos of others, of friends or family.
Farmville?
Pardon me?
Farmville?
Farmville,
Mafia Wars,
games,
right?
yes, all of those types of activities. So that curiosity about people they know, and of course curiosity about people they don't. So in terms of how we can monetize social networking sites, and to the point of this discussion, of course, one is through the advertising and who's actually going to the sites. But the second, and it's really critical, is the whole idea of recommendation. So there's been various pieces that have been written that estimate about 70% of the value of the social networking site is what's called the momentum effect, people being able to share or pass on a link or some kind of content. So, and those that have just spoken have talked about that. But those who, for example, pass on a news story, if you look at the advertising that's attached to that, they're more likely to recommend the brand, they're more likely to actually visit the site if they've actually shared that link. So while the advertising is key, the whole idea of how I share and the concept of recommendation, which, by the way, has stood the test of time. Everyone's always turned to friends and family for recommendation. Social networking sites are providing this new platform for brands to be able to connect through that mechanism.
And then that sort of stretches into the whole engagement process and the listening and monitoring.
That's right. Yeah, so of course there are a whole series of systems that enable us to actually watch and monitor what people are doing online. We can track sentiment, we can track the volume of what people are talking about. So while the whole conversations have always taken place, the ability for us to now intervene, measure, and track those conversations is a really exciting opportunity. In terms of engagement, again, we've talked about engagement with media for as long as media has been active, and we know particularly online, again, that engagement matters. I was looking at a stat actually in relation to online videos, and they were comparing those that people rated as highly engaging versus those that are low engagement. And again, the recall of the advertising or the willingness to share that video is 2 to 3 times higher if the video is engaging. So not only does engagement matter from a advertising standpoint, it matters from the way and the willingness for people to actively get involved with that site.
Great stuff, thank you. Moving on to Maria Mahdali. Maria, could you tell us a little bit about your youth platform that you built? Tell us a little bit about, I understand that in January of this year, the Saudi 100 fast growth companies named your company Raman the country's fastest growing startup. So what did you do, why did you do it, and how?
Okay. First of all, let me say that I'm really happy that I'm part of this forum. I'm not an expert like everyone here, But we started Roman Company a couple of years ago. It's a innovative media house, and one of the ventures is FANAC. It's a youth platform that supports young people with their own talents through online and offline activities. Last January, we were kind of very surprised that we were named one of the top startup, because we were like sitting there and they were saying the numbers, who's the third, the second, and we're like, we're not even on the list, because we've been very busy. We didn't monitor. We didn't know how our company grew to become the fastest. So FANAC focuses on supporting young people through online activities and offline. The online activities that we do is we engage them through social networks, through our website, and we engage them that we have a conversation with them. We tell them, okay, what do you need? What do you want? And we kind of guide them. Young people represent more than half of the population. Actually, in Saudi, 80% are under 30 years old. So, and 11 million uses internet, and most of them are on social networks or either browsing the internet. So what are they doing online? Why are they spending all this time online? So what they're doing is they're either chatting, having conversations, or spending time on social networks. And it became the conversation that we have with them. It became any kind of brand. They use social networks in order to have a conversation with their audience. It's not like a one-way conversation like we used to have before, media before. It's like they're sending messages, but the audience are just only receiving. Now it's a conversation. They need more. They don't want to just receive messages. They need more than just that. So these kind of the conversations that we have.
And how does your company take that into youth-aware entrepreneurship? And how are you getting, or how are you trying to attract investors to support youth entrepreneurship?
So what we do is we basically support them not financially. We support them with guide them. And because we have a lot of the platform has a lot of young people, they trust us. They kind of like us because we're fun, entertaining, and yet we have a message behind us. So businesses and brands and corporates, they came to us. They're like, okay, we need your audience. We need the people you have. What can we do? We tell them, invest in our projects, invest in other, and you will reach to the target audience. So they became, the cycle became that corporates help us help the young people, and they reach their audience.
And so, like, how does Roman and its companies, or projects like FANAC, end up making money here?
Okay, so one of the things that we do is we do innovative social media management. Is a lot of companies come to us and they're like, we don't have the time to manage our social networks. We don't know how to use Twitter. We don't know how many times should we update our status on Facebook. And you guys do it all the time and you have the audience, so tell us how you do it. So what we do is we manage their social networks. This is one of the services that we do. And the other thing that happened is corporates came and businesses and brands came to us and said, I want to reach the target audience. So we come up with ideas, with innovative ideas for these brands to reach the target audience that we have in a new way that includes a lot of social networks, includes a lot of engagement and conversation with the audience.
Great, thank you, Maria. Moving on to Dr. Yusuf Mansur. Yusuf, as an economist and someone who's looking at this closely and what's happening in this space, what are your observations? What is going on here, and how is this going to reflect on economies as a whole in the region from a social media perspective? Sorry, Yusuf, I think we might have a problem with one of the microphones over here. Can we have a handheld, please? Or just switch. They are trying to silence me already.
I always say that. That's right.
Go ahead, sir.
I really wanted to talk about how to make money out of social networks and how to make it in our region. You know, they say that if you don't go after the money, go after something you love, and that should be the starting point. Learn the skills. They say that you need about 10,000 hours doing something to actually master it. So you master it, learn what's required, the details, and then network it. Well, networking is the name of the game. Social networks are very different from industrial type networks. They're easy to own. They don't require heavy skills. They can easily, the information in them and material can change quickly, and they allow accessibility and engagement. Engagement is the name of the game. We come now to the two challenges that face us in the region. Advertising spend is less than 1% of advertising in the whole world, and even though we make up about 5% of the population of the world. The second thing is low content, low Arabic content. Everybody has been talking about the less than 1% Arabic content in Google. Given these two challenges, the marketing industry is changing. What people are more and more looking at is looking to listen to people with knowledge and authority on the subject. But marketing itself is, people are averse to marketing efforts. So whatever you do in marketing on social networks has to be an engagement type of exercise. It has to be in a discussion format. So the longer you stay at it and the more authority you establish on your social network, the more likely you are to be able to monetize it. Now, advertising spending is likely to be less this year than it was last year. Actually, it is, based on what happened regarding the global crisis. But actually, advertising spending in the Arab world is very low, $50 per capita in the Gulf, $35 per capita within the region, the MENA region. So for the positive thing, as the speaker said, is that more and more youth are using internet and spending more time on social networks than they are on TV. So there is a switch. And this switch, given the youth opportunity in our region, should push one to really work toward creating opportunities within this market. And there are tremendous possibilities for growth.
Thank you. Come back to that shortly. I'm going to move on to Alex McNabb. Is your mic okay over there? Okay. Alex, let's talk a little bit about, things like crowdsourcing. What's happening with crowdsourcing in the MENA region? Perhaps you might have some insights on that. What are our businesses doing? Are we actually implementing any of this? Are we actually able to use crowdsourcing to learn new things and do new things?
No, I think a lot of companies are still approaching social media purely as a marketing issue and not looking at using it in other parts of the enterprise. I mean, it's a great HR tool. Something like 80% of US companies use LinkedIn and Facebook as HR tools. I think we're lagging a bit behind in many of the ways that we use social media, many of the ways we approach social media. But the changes are fundamental, and they're underpinned by a growing amount of data from the region. I'm glad to see that Ipsos is focusing on the region, but we're part of an ecosystem that uses SEO companies, web development companies, and research companies. The research company that we use for audience research and online sentiment analysis works in English uniquely and Arabic. And Arabic is a very difficult language to do online sentiment and monitoring and analysis with because of the fuzziness of Arabic use online. Not only MSN Arabic, but actually how you use Arabic itself. And I want to take a slightly higher level view, because I think that might be useful in the time I've got. I predict 4 deaths. The death of telephone companies as we know them, the death of advertising agencies and the world of advertising as we know it, the death of print, newspapers and books, and the death of companies that insist on continuing with an Arab ana mudir approach to their businesses, that refuse to recognize that customers are really important and not just a message to be pushed out by the marketing team. You've got to close the loop. You've got to actually mean what you say. It's no longer about having some mindless brand values and punching them out at hapless consumers using big media vehicles. It's actually about speaking to people and having respect for your customer. And looking a little bit at some data, because we had some data from Ipsos, there are some huge lies going on in our region right now, which I don't believe the online industry is doing enough to address. 88% of online people across the Middle East, and we conducted the biggest surveys so far with Effective Measure twice this year of 7,000 people. 88% of online people in the Middle East go online every day and spend a significant amount of their days online throughout the day. People watch TV in the evenings, listen to radio and read newspapers in the mornings, but they actually use the internet right the way through the day. The vast majority of people do not read magazines for more than 30 minutes a day. In Ramadan, the spend on advertising on television went through the roof. In Ramadan, online people across the Middle East and North Africa spent not 1 second more watching television than they normally would. They watched it 2 hours later, but they didn't spend much more time watching TV. So we're starting to see some changes in consumer behavior that are really fundamental. Let's look at Facebook for 1 second. 17 million Facebook users across the Middle East and North Africa. Every day, that region buys 15 million newspapers. That's a tipping point. It's like the day that we had more mobiles than we had fixed lines. There are more people using Facebook in the Middle East and North Africa than are buying newspapers. To reach that audience of 15 million, actually 14.9 million newspaper readers, I would have to advertise in 274 multilingual newspapers across the region at an enormous cost. The advertising money that this region is throwing down the plug hole is amazing. We are advertising in magazines that nobody reads and in newspapers that don't have the reach, and Facebook ads make so much more sense. And the challenge to our region is that everybody will start to use Facebook so much more as Facebook monetizes and becomes transactional. The challenge we have is finding some alternatives that mean that our companies continue to survive.
But Alex, and wise words from the Grim Reaper of the ICT sector, predicting lots of deaths.
No, it's not at all about being a Grim Reaper. It's about recognizing the fundamental change taking place and moving to accept and to work with that change.
Yeah.
The Grim Reaper bit comes if you sit with your fingers in your ears going, la, 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 this stuff isn't important. It's important.
Very good points, and I do definitely want to come back to this in terms of how do we change our typical behaviors towards media and towards online. And I think I'm going to put Majied Qasem on the spot here. Yep, it's working. It's working. Don't even try to back out of this.
Thank you.
Majied, tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing at D1G and how are you trying to get your clients out of their traditional mindsets, and what are you doing in terms of revenue streams?
Okay. I mean, before I start about D1G, I think it's important to talk a little bit about social media. I think the term is new, so we started hearing it in the past probably few years. But the actual act itself of having people go online, share their ideas, share their stories, discuss things is actually quite old. It's maybe 20 years ago. So it's actually it's an old idea that was brought to the forelight, that was actually people started talking about it because of the emergence of mainstream businesses, like, for example, MySpace, Facebook, LinkedIn. All of a sudden, people started grouping these into social media, while forgetting that the majority of social media is not these guys when it comes to this region. If you look at Facebook, for example, Facebook has, in Saudi Arabia, around 1 million users, okay? Saudi Arabia today, based on numbers, and the last numbers I've checked were around 9 million people. So basically, Facebook is around 10% penetration within the Saudi internet market. So when you talk about promoting your brand, promoting your business on Facebook, you're effectively missing up on around 90% of your potential target audience. With that idea, the idea of D1G came in. There was a gap, there was a need to create, I wouldn't say relevant content, I would say relevant platforms where people can come in, and create and share the relevant content. Excuse me. In D1G, when you look at when we launched our business in 2007, actually around April 2007, in a very short 3 years, we've actually created, by allowing people to come in and upload their own content without us actually coming and controlling it, we've created 2 million pieces of content over the past 3 years. To put that in context, what does 3 million mean? If we assume 99% of that content is irrelevant, 99% of that content is meaningless, 1%, that's 20,000 pieces of content that is quite relevant that has been created on this platform. I would like to share one story about D1G. There was a company we acquired called Hasna. Hasna was a traditional publishing business. A few people sitting in a room and uploading stories about sort of targeting women within the Middle East. And that business had been around for a year. It had around 20, 30,000 users a month. We acquired the business, we socialized it. We took the publishers out, we allowed people to upload, and we became moderators. And in a short window of time, probably 3 to 6 months, it went from 20 to 30,000 users to around 1 million a month. I mean, the scale was phenomenal. So this is the power of D1G and the power of social media and their ability to create content. Now, before I close, I just want to remind people is, we tend to fall into a fallacy when we talk in the Middle East, is that we're sitting here, we're talking, everybody seems to know what Facebook is, what LinkedIn is, what MySpace is. The reality is the Middle East is a highly polarized region, extremely polarized region. So you could get in your car from here, drive 30 minutes down south or up north, walk in a village, in a school, and ask people, what do you know about Facebook? And you would probably get, nobody has ever heard of Facebook. I mean, maybe that's an extreme example, but it's highly polarized. So the mistake that I'm seeing people do in this region when they come to actually social media, and especially social media spending on social media, is let's create a page on Facebook. Let's talk to our people on Facebook. Let's get in LinkedIn, MySpace. But you're missing on 90%. There are a lot of people in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, in Jordan, that are specialized social sites gearing to that local population that are extremely relevant and have a lot more reach than these big sites into these countries.
Well, your talk, Majied, just raised like 5 or 6 questions in my head, but for a second, I just want to talk about user data and privacy and security. How do you handle that? Some sites are actually going out there and saying, are rethinking their terms of use and their policies and saying, well, whatever content you post on our site is now ours, and you agree to this. What is this going to do to user-generated content? If I can't post something on a site and say this is still mine, am I actually relinquishing this content to the site?
Actually, we see that as an opportunity. We actually play that card when it comes to actually promoting our site by actually making sure that the ownership of the content remains to the user. So the user have the option to remove that content and it will never be seen again. So it's we understand that challenge that Facebook had and some other sites. We actually come in and we claim, we give no ownership, and we actually do not use that content other than how the user intended to actually upload it on the site and promote it. So that's our answer to this component. In terms of privacy and the rest of the user data, we're very careful. We don't actually sell our user base. We don't actually target it directly by advertisers. So none of our users have received, spam letters from advertisers through us and so forth. We're very careful to ensure that we don't become just another spamming network or spamming site that people sign up and they start receiving a bunch of junk mail from us.
All right, thanks, Majied. And Nadine Toukan. Yes. I don't know where, I seriously don't know where to start with you, but I actually know, I'm going to bring up an important point, which is content curation. I want you to tell us a little bit about content curation, where we are in the MENA region in terms of content curation, what it means, what do we have to do to make it happen?
Can I take that a step back first? I'd just like to define what I think social networks are first, so that Please. We can sort of swim through the content. For me, today, social networks are similar to what we once knew as the Majlis. I call them Majlis 2.0. Because it's a place where everybody can go to and we can all be who we want to be and figure out what we want to do there. I think that's fundamentally very important for us to keep on top of mind, because then it becomes a place for everybody and it becomes something familiar to our culture and not a tool that we're borrowing from another world. And I think Majied's very right in pointing out the need to look at the local networks where Arabs are socializing. In terms of content curation, curation is a very big, important word. It comes from curating in museums, and it's not only content filtering, it's about generating content pools that are able to engage people and induce certain types of actions with goals at the end. There are certain activists who curate certain content because they want to get to a point and they want to be able to grow a network and lobby for something. Content curation means that somebody owns a conversation and is growing a tribe around it and wants to get to a point where they want to change something, impact something, address something, or be able to benefit the bigger community. Why that matters is for many of the points that everybody on the panel talked about: monetization, growing networks, targeting, marketing relevantly, being able to listen. They're great places where we can listen to what's going on, and where there's content that is curated and sort of managed in a certain way. That means people are focused on these topics or these areas of conversations. And for consumers, for marketers, for governments, for civic activists, these places are really important because that's a place where we can listen. We can really sit there, observe, listen, see what's going on, and take action after that. We don't do that enough in the offline world. The offline world is extremely siloed. We've become completely weirded out about how we socialize in the offline world. And online makes us completely break down these barriers. We have to do that consciously. It won't happen. There is a danger of siloing the online world as well, and we have to be absolutely obsessed not to do that mistake again. And we have a great opportunity to do it right, because we have the tools, and it's easy, and we're aware of that, and we know the before and after and what could be, actually. So we can put our best foot forward and change who we want to be for the next decade or lifetime, basically.
Okay. And now, I want to go a little bit into the sociological aspects of this. You've been very involved in some projects like Urdun Mubda. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there. Tell us a little bit about some of the other initiatives that you've been involved with or that you've seen arise that are also having an impact on society in the region.
Well, there are many. Just Urdun Mubda is a site that Yusuf and I started out of a conversation that he kicked off, saying there are 10,000 steps that can convert Jordan into a creative economy. And today, Urdun Mubda is a collective blog, if you wish, where people discuss many issues, Jordan-centric, that matter to us, that we want to change in a way or not. And that's really pretty much what it is. It's an open collective blog. One of the initiatives that I saw grow out of a member on Urdun Mubda is also another social network called La Sharaf fil Jarima, which is No Honor in Crime. And it's a group of Jordanians, and now it's growing into the region, who said, we want to reframe the word honor in respect to crimes against honor. We want to take back the word honor into our culture, into our religion, into who we are, and we want to separate it from the crime. And what I love about that is they're going into the cultural and societal grassroots of who we are, and not trying to bash it on the head, and formulating conversations with victims, with families of victims, with society at large, with researchers, with general society, actually, about what these crimes really mean and why we're tagging honor to them. And based on how that conversation will grow, they will be able to speak to legal, they will be able to speak to the society at large. That is a movement for life. That doesn't have a deadline. It doesn't have a finish date. It's an ongoing conversation, very Arabic-centric. It started in Jordan. It'll grow. We've already got somebody from Syria on Facebook who said, I want to be able to grow this as well and collaborate with you. These kinds of small movements are really important. They're happening everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. We have to listen to them. And we have to find ways to find linkages between them so that people do realize that this eventually will have impact and will have benefit to us on a cultural level and on an economic level, actually, because when people are socializing and communicating, they become better people. If we can agree to disagree in good conversation, that's healthier. If we can become a healthier society, that's a more monetizable society, basically.
Thanks, Nadine. And I want you to get your questions ready. If you have some questions for our panelists, let's please keep them short and to the point. And if we could just have the floating microphones around to the audience. Before we take our first question, one of the attendees at the MENAICT forum kindly pointed out to me a story on the Financial Times on ft.com posted yesterday. According to research by TNS, which is one of the research arms of the WPP, 7 out of 10 of the top emerging markets using social media today are in the Middle East. 7 out of 10 of the top users of social media in the emerging markets are here in the Middle East. That's really big. And that's all. That's all I wanted to say. I think I just wanted to interject that. No, but it's, I mean, I was actually floored by that. I thought, and it's actually by, exceeding all expectations. So there's a lot of potential. I mean, there's a lot going on here. But there are also a lot of issues I think our panelists have brought to the foreground. A lot of real problems as well. And we have to think of solutions to them. So without further ado, some questions. Yes, please. If you'd like to stand up and introduce yourself so that
yeah,
the guys
my name is Eli Aoun. I'm Chief Operating Officer for Ipsos Media City in the region. And don't worry, Natalie, my question is not for you. I have actually a comment on Dr. Yusuf and Mr. Alexander because it's very important when we use numbers to, it's very critical because it can be sometimes misleading. I just want to say that advertising revenues in the world is increasing. In our region also, it is increasing compared to last year, so this is very important to mention. Second point is about what Mr. Alexander mentioned about the death of offline media, mainly newspapers and all that, and this is not true because all our studies are still showing that newspapers in the region are still getting a lot of readership. And also, there is no way that we believe that during Ramadan, viewership on TV has decreased. All our studies show that the average total ratings during outside Ramadan in the months in most of the counties in the region are between 1,800 TRPs to 2,200. During Ramadan, it jumps to 3,000 TRPs minimum. So Ramadan is the month of TV. I just wanted to mention those points because, of course, we want to be optimistic, but we have to keep our feet on the ground. Online is coming, and this is why we are also entering this era, but we have to mention this. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. Alex, what do you think of that?
I think I haven't got a microphone. Oh. Okay. No, that's working. Okay. Slightly awkward. Can I have my microphone?
Is it?
Is it working? Is it working? That's working. Right. To answer that, my prediction of the death of the newspaper might not be relevant to the Middle East right now, but it ain't far away. How many eyeballs really are attracted by today's Middle Eastern newspapers? One of the reasons that Spot On has made such a strong move to online over the last 2 years is that my partner and I sat and looked at each other one day and went, my God, we are so bored with what we do. We can get a whole page of the Times of Oman for our client who's over the moon with it, but it doesn't change one heart or one mind because nobody in their right minds reads the Times of Oman. It is an unreadable newspaper. Emirates Business 24/7 is the first Middle East newspaper to close. Others will follow it. The world is moving online. Across the US, newspapers are closing daily. Friends of mine are losing their jobs. The UK advertising market and newspaper market is reduced 11% over the last 3 years. The Times is scrabbling desperately to build a paywall. It's lost 120,000 readers this month alone, and it launched its paywall scheme in August when readership was at an all-time low. So I don't think my prediction is that far-fetched. In terms of whether people watch TV on Ramadan or not, we're never going to agree with Ipsos. We don't get employed by or work with the advertising agency market. It was the biggest online survey of anybody in the Middle East, 7,000 people across the region, Middle East and North Africa. It was conducted at the end of September, and it showed us that those people didn't watch more TV. We're never going to agree on that because our figures were different to yours. There's no doubt at all that the trend is happening, that the offline media, the traditional print media, is transforming. Less and less journalists working for newspapers in our region. I think anybody that works with public relations and media will tell you it's harder and harder to get through to journalists because there are fewer of them working for newspapers doing more work because the papers are cutting back. Gulf News, at the height of the great Dubai boom, was 1.4 kilograms in weight. It has never moved upwards from being 400 grams since. So that's hardly a healthy advertising market bringing itself up. I know Dubai is not looking great, but that newspaper is not building revenue, it's defending revenue. And I think that's happening across the region. What's happening with the eyeballs? They're going to Nadine's small clatches. They're chatting to each other. They're Googling stuff that interests them. They're using Twitter and Dig and Delicious and Congo and Reddit and other tools to discover stuff that interests them. And they're using RSS readers to keep online with that stuff. I can talk to Nadine. I can talk to other friends. I can read a blog from a girl who's gone to Nablus to be a teacher, which 400 people picked up in one day because it was a great blog. That type of atomization of media is so much more important than that whole view of the world of saying, oh, well, I've got 1 million people and only 1 million people matter. We're actually talking about communities and conversations that are much more powerful than good old-fashioned cut and paste out of Reuters media.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's take another question because we only have a few minutes. Yes, over there, please.
McElwee with King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. We are interested in facilitating an online innovation portal for the region. And I'd like to hear what some of you might say about what the challenges of that are. But what we're going to do to try to get there is we're going to do a private invitation-only crowdsourcing site with a company, Chaotix, in the US. It's free. I would like to invite everybody here at the forum to give me your business card. We'll get you on the list. What we're going to try to do for 6 months is get people talking about all aspects of innovation day in and day out instead of, you know, only when we can get to meet. And what we really are looking for is to ask the crowd to identify for us what are those services related to starting and forming companies, doing science-based research, growing a technology-based business that you would like to see and talk about online. Can some of those services be delivered online in the way of training or education? Many, many, many questions. We can't answer them. We can't really help facilitate this without taking it to the larger community. And so we're not looking for company sponsors. It doesn't cost anything. We're really looking for people, scientists, engineers, teachers, college students, marketing executives, everybody, to get involved with this project. And I hope, get a look at me. Please give me your business card because I'm trying to collect as many as possible and get people involved in this. Thank you.
Great. So get a hold of Terry McElwee from KAUST and get involved and engaged in this project. Thanks, Terry. Yes, Kareem, real quick.
It's working? Okay. Kareem Darwish from Microsoft. I just have a quick question. The pay-per-click in our region is about 1 to 2 pennies per click, while it's about 10 to 20 cents if you have an English website, which means, you know, an advertising-based, you know, website where it just depends on pay-per-click, just cannot survive in our market at this point in time. Do you see this changing? And if so, how will it change? Thank you.
Yeah, Majied.
I think the number you quoted for pay-for-click may be applicable to sites like Google, Yahoo, and otherwise. But for a lot of the local sites, regional sites, it's significantly higher than that. They don't really charge you per click; they charge you per CPM. But when you do the math to look at the cost per click, it actually works out to be comparable to those in the US. If you ask yourself, why is that? Why is it when you go and advertise on Google locally, you end up getting 1 cent, 2 cents? While when you go through local sites, D1G or other sites, you actually get around 20, 30 cents or even higher at some point per click. It's the relevance component. I mean, and that's it's actually how to be relevant. And I'll be very brief, Oji. We've launched a service called D1 on the 24th of this month. With that service, people can come in and they can create any site they want, any social media they want, a complete Facebook in a box or D1G in a box. And what we've noticed is people started creating sites like for Toyota FJ Cruiser, for example. Super relevant, very focused sites. People created sites for Nokia phones. Now, for these sites that were created by those users, and they invited their friends and focused, we would actually are able to charge even higher than that. It goes up to $1 at some time per click, because the context is there, the engine is there, the technology is there. The 1 cent, 2 cents only kicks in if you're using automated technology that doesn't support Arabic, that you're buying it out there, and most likely the person paying for that service is not in this region also. So this is, and I see more of over the coming years, I see actually more focus and more shift in dollars to these relevant, localized communities where people are paying premium for the service, but they're reaching the right audience.
Okay, thanks, Majied. This might be the last question. Nikki, could we?
Good morning. Is this on? Yeah. Good morning. I'm Nikki Radisik. I am a PR and marketing consultant for Genium, a software company from the Balkans. I'd like to just really quickly try to take this to the next level. A lot of big name brands in the world have started using their Facebook fan pages, for example, to sell their products to the public. Now, this again is in the experimental stages. My question to you, and I would very much like to hear this from particularly from Ms. Lacey and Alex, do we see social media and e-commerce merging, and how?
Sure, I'll start off. I mean, just in terms of how social media is being used, of course, there's an immense rise in virtual currency. So if you just look at how that's perpetuating itself throughout the world, people are holding on to virtual currencies, and the estimated revenue was in the billions, actually, of virtual currencies last year. So there is actually a merger of those two in terms of how companies are using social networks to actually sell and perpetuate their products. And of course, when we do some of the listening, you have to be very careful about who you're actually talking to and who is actually giving you those opinions. So in terms of actually the credibility, the actual audience size, all of those things, you know, still very much matter. But, you know, one of the interesting things about the online world, of course, is impatience. And we see this all the time. There was an interesting study called e-commerce impatience. People wait 30 seconds on a site before they'll actually jump off and move somewhere else. So there's also this speed of change and how that's impacting. But clearly there's a lot of privacy issues, audience issues, and respect for the consumer, where we see actually a lot of changes happening that will both impact positively and negatively that trend. So.
Thanks, Ali. Alex?
Very briefly, I think there are a number of things happening which I think are important. Facebook credits is a very important move because that's when you can turn real-world money into virtual money and then transact and trade with it. And that turns a social network into a very easy decision. We're starting to see social tools like, I can't remember the name of the site, but you can put your mobile up to a radio, take a sample of it, and then actually buy the tune. And you've got stuff like Groove Shark and Pandora, which allow you to buy music and share music. You know, Blip FM, you're sharing music, and then you can buy it off the back of that site. So basically what the sites are doing is letting you socially use stuff and say, hey, if you're interested in that stuff and your friends have recommended it, go and buy it. So that's monetizable at that point of view. I think the other side of it is we haven't quite seen what's going to happen yet. One of the reasons I prophesied the death of telcos is that actually we've become number independent. This is one that hit me a couple of weeks ago, talking at an event in Dubai. How many of you dialed a phone number in the last week? Actually dialed a phone number. We don't do it anymore. We've become number independent. We used to be numbers. We're like the prisoner. Now we're men and women. We're people. We're URL independent. We're just an identity, and that identity is very, very mobile. So there are very new ways that people are interacting and are reachable and are deciding to transact with each other. And if your transactions then become number independent and mobile in the same way, you start to get a very interesting world where our communication is taking place over these platforms. And then you look at stuff like Amazon. If Amazon can make itself more Facebooky, which it's doing all the time, then Amazon's a very powerful transaction platform. Facebook's going to be a very transaction platform. Now Google and the guys at Microsoft are both allowing you to do online video chat, to use your identities in those ways, bring in new services like Google Earth. And at the moment, the Google model is all clickable, but actually it also has the potential to become sellable. And that's where I think where guys like D1G have got a fantastic challenge and also an enormous opportunities to bring that stuff to the Arab world before the big guys learn to Arabize their big services.
I mean, social media, I'm a firm believer in it. I believe in building brands. I believe in communication. But essentially, it's a tool in our tool belt. It's not the end-all and be-all. And how many, and unfortunately, when I look around, I see people running around saying, I want a Facebook page. I want a Facebook page. But why? Is that how you should be using it? Are you talking to your audience? Do you have a content strategy? So my question to you is, do you feel that clients, that brands in this region are being strategic about this?
Who hasn't jumped in on something? Mostafa, please, let's have your thoughts. Yeah, have we got the microphone working over here, guys?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yep. In Egypt, for example, today there are brands who are paying for Facebook campaigns just to get more followers or more likes on their page, where they produce the latest promotions, join our group, and then you get a discount at the store. There are lots of these activities in Egypt, for example, today.
Mo, let's hear from you a little bit.
If I may add, so there's research that has been done that says a Twitter follower is 37% more likely to buy services from your brand. And the average acquisition price for a follower or a Facebook fan is about $3. And it's justified because of the fact that they'd be more willing to engage with your brand and more willing to spend money when they transact.
Questioning the value of social media. Sorry, I'm not questioning its value.
Right.
What I'm wondering is whether clients are actually considering whether their audience is on social media, how they interact with social media, their behavior. Do they just read content? Do they upload content? How are they using it? Because ultimately, if you look at social media as, again, a tool in your tool belt, maybe you'll find that the message you have or the audience that you're trying to reach might not be best suited with a Facebook page.
Alex is going to jump out of his seat now.
Yeah,
Nadine. Yeah.
I just want to add something or try and clarify something. If a client or a brand is only looking at social media as a tool, you're doomed. If you're going to look at it as only numbers, it's absolutely pointless. It's a culture that has to be instilled inside the company, from the smallest guy to the CEO, from the person who's answering the phone, who's never been on Facebook, never has any intent to ever tweet anything, including the team who's going to be on these social networks, manning them and working with your agencies, your external, whatever it is. It is an absolute culture. It has to be in the DNA of a brand, of a culture, on everybody that's working on it. The CEO is now the communicator of the company. The salesperson is, the customer support person, the product manager. Everybody who has a tool, as you say, that can communicate becomes a communicator for and on behalf of the company. If it's not in the DNA of the brand of the company, then you're just fumbling with numbers and little gimmicks and little tactics, and some might work and some might not. So that's really fundamentally how some people can take it to the next level, benefit or not. On the other hand, companies and brands should listen more than they speak and talk, because what's being said on and about your company or your brand is phenomenally important. You have paid tons of money over years trying to figure that out, actually, and now you can go into a place, listen really, really well, and figure it out and work with your customer, with your bigger community, to be able to take that to the next level, bring them in on board on what you need, fix whatever you need to fix, or celebrate whatever you want to celebrate, and grow. So genetically re-engineer yourself.
So stop dealing with social media as a department in your company and
it's
activate
not a department.
everyone.
No, it's not a department.
Right.
It's a mindset. It's a culture. It
Yep.
has to be. It really has to be genetic in the hallways, in the boardroom, in how you're designing your next product, how you're working it. It's not an appendage.
And Alex, I remember you saying something about how reputation-wise, you can't hide behind, let's say, what your PR agency does for you anymore. You're out there in the open, and you sort of have to manage your reputation and be transparent.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how much I agree with Nadine. I mean, how fundamentally I agree with her. And a lot of the work we're doing with companies is not funky-dunky campaigns on Facebook. And if your agencies are offering you that, then change your mind and change your agency. Ideally, if you can't find an agency that will work with you, go and do it by yourself. You can. You don't need an agency. And never let an agency speak for you online. Most of the work we're doing is with clients is starting to look at those very business processes and starting to look at those business behaviors. And it can be hard. You get that whole attitude of, well, why should I talk to my customers? They might criticize me. I had one client who was a retailer who was saying, why should I let my staff talk to my customers? You're a retailer, dude. What do you think they do every day in the shop?
You talk to your
they talk to them. But why would I let them do that online? You know, other people might see. It's like,
yeah, I mean, that's totally true. I mean, I've had a client who's a major airline that shut down their Facebook page because they didn't want anyone posting anything on it. Very simply.
They're just not going to be part of that conversation.
They'll be posting
themselves.
it somewhere else,
They're not
right?
going to own that conversation. You better own your conversation and be part of it. Then people talk about you.
Actually, if I may,
One closing comment.
I think it's there is the question here. People ask, should I get involved in social media? I think I bet you, and I challenge you, if you're in business, if you have a brand, you are already in social media. People are already talking about your brand somewhere. I think if you're in HP, if you're in Nokia, if you're Microsoft, if you're in IBM, somebody out there is tweeting, is talking about it, is commenting about it somewhere online. The question is, how are you going to manage that reputation? How are you going to manage what people talk about your brand, what they're saying, and if they're having problems, how are you going to address those issues? That's the real question. How do you use the social media to really manage what people are talking about you and build trust with the audience? It's not whether you want to be involved or not. You are involved.
Thank you.
One nanosecond. Aramex. Look at Aramex. An amazing company. And all they've done is go online. And if you just pound your keyboard and say, Aramex sucks, they go, hi, can we help? And I happen to know that the team at Aramex have turned around at least 600 dissatisfied customers into people that go on Twitter and say, I think Aramex is great, they helped me. It's a great, great case study.
Awesome. We could go on forever about this, and please do go on forever about this. Hashtag MENAICT, and it's going to go beyond this forum. Keep building that. Thank you to our panelists. Scott, thank you for your patience.
Majied, thank you. Please keep your seats. We're moving directly into the next session, but let's thank again our panel on social media and our moderator, Majied Halawa.